usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, right? Like it feels almost like engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Very mechanical.
Right. Like you break your arm, you go get an x-ray, and it shows that jagged white line on the black background. And the doctor just points at it and says, you know, there it is. Here's the cast.
Yeah.
You're going to heal in exactly 6 weeks.
It's very binary. Like, it's either broken or it's not broken. You're sick or you're cured. And I mean, we've basically been culturally conditioned to expect our medicine to be, well, highly visible and easily categorized like that.
But then you step into the world of neurodevelopment.
Oh, completely different universe.
Yeah, you step into the world of rare genetic conditions. And specifically, when you enter the reality of PURA syndrome, that x-ray machine is it's utterly useless.
Absolutely useless. You're looking at a diagnostic and support landscape that is profoundly complex.
Right. And for the parents navigating it, and this is key, that complexity isn't just some, like, interesting medical abstraction in a journal. It is their actual daily life.
Yeah.
It translates directly into this towering, just relentless administrative maze. And that maze literally dictates their family's financial survival.
Which is exactly why this deep dive is structured the way it is today. I mean, we are speaking directly to you, the parents, the carers, the lifelines for children diagnosed with PURA syndrome.
Because if you're listening to this right now, let's be honest, you're likely operating on a severe sleep deficit.
Oh, without a doubt. Running on pure adrenaline.
Exactly. You're running on fumes, and you are almost certainly overwhelmed by the sheer tonnage of paperwork that the government demands of you just to access, like, basic support.
So our goal today is to completely demystify the UK benefits system. We're not just going to, read you a list of government websites.
No, nobody needs that.
Right. We are going to give you a highly practical roadmap to secure the financial and educational support that your family is legally owed. We really need to reframe how we look at these forms.
Yeah, this isn't just bureaucratic busy work. This is about extracting the resources you need to build a scaffolding for your child's life. And we're having this conversation right now because the timing is incredibly critical. Today is Friday, April 3, 2026.
And that date is paramount. I cannot stress this enough.
Why is that exact date so important?
Because in just a few days, on April 6, 2026, the new tax year begins. And the UK benefit rates are shifting. So the financial thresholds we're going to discuss today are the brand new numbers.
Got it. So if you use last year's math...
If you use last year's math, you could trigger a catastrophic loss of income. You have to use the 2026 numbers.
Okay, that is a huge warning right off the bat. But before we even touch a single pound sterling or, open a single DWP form, we have to ground ourselves in the clinical reality of PURA syndrome.
Absolutely.
Because if we don't deeply understand the biology of this condition, we cannot accurately translate it into the cold, rigid language that the benefit system requires.
Yeah.
So let's start at the microscopic level. What actually is PURA syndrome?
Well, to understand the bureaucracy, you really must understand the genetics first. So PURA syndrome is caused by a mutation, or sometimes a complete deletion, on the PURA gene.
Right.
And this gene is located on chromosome 5, specifically at a position called 5q31.3.
Okay, and when we say this is a rare condition, I think we really need to contextualize just how rare. Because according to the latest data we have in the source material, there are only about 750 to 800 individuals who have been formally identified with this condition worldwide.
Worldwide, yeah. That number is just staggering when you think about the implications for a parent.
It really is.
I mean, when you, as a parent, walk into a meeting with a local authority for an educational plan, or, you sit down with an assessor from the Department for Work and Pensions, there is a 99.9% chance you are the very first person that official has ever met who is dealing with PURA.
Wow. Which means the burden of education falls entirely on the exhausted parent. Like, the government won't know what this is, so the parent basically has to become the preeminent medical lecturer on chromosome 5 just to get a parking badge.
It's a profound structural unfairness in the system. But, recognizing that reality is step one.
Right.
So what is actually happening at 5q31.3? Well, the PURA gene encodes a protein that is literally called the purine-rich element binding protein A.
Okay, and what does that protein do?
It acts like a master regulator in the body. It is absolutely vital for normal brain development. It helps direct how nerve cells grow, how they divide, and crucially, how nerve signals are transmitted throughout the central nervous system.
Okay, so if the nervous system is like the body's electrical grid, The PURA protein is what helps manufacture the wires and like the insulation around those wires.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. Specifically, it plays a massive role in myelination.
Myelination, that's the creation of the myelin sheath, right? The coating around the neurons.
Exactly, the myelin sheath that coats the neurons. So when a child has a mutation on this gene, they don't produce enough of this functional protein. The electrical grid is compromised from the very beginning. And this triggers just a massive cascade of developmental and physical challenges.
Right, let's break down that cascade.
Yeah.
Because these symptoms are the exact data points that parents need to basically weaponize on their benefit form.
Yes, they are your evidence.
It starts with profound hypotonia, right, which is low muscle tone.
Yes. Moderate to severe hypotonia is a hallmark of the syndrome. It is generalized weakness. And it's vital to understand that low muscle tone isn't just about, like, not being able to lift heavy things.
What is it then?
Muscle tone is the continuous passive contraction of the muscles that keeps us upright against gravity, even when you're just sitting there.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of it like that.
Right. So without it, the child has immense difficulty learning to roll over, to sit up independently, to crawl, or to walk. Gravity is basically winning.
And the sources note that many children with PURA are completely non-ambulatory.
Right.
Like they rely on specialized wheelchairs or supportive seating simply to exist in a space safely.
Yeah.
And they struggle with fine motor skills too, right? Like reaching, grasping a spoon, manipulating a toy.
Absolutely. And that hypotonia doesn't just affect the limbs, the arms and legs. It affects the internal muscles as well, which leads to another major clinical issue: dysphagia.
Dysphagia. That's severe difficulty with swallowing and feeding.
Correct. If the muscles in the throat and the esophagus lack the tone to coordinate a swallow, eating becomes a really high-risk activity. There's a constant danger of aspiration.
Aspiration is where the food or liquid enters the lungs instead of the stomach, right?
Yes, which can lead to life-threatening pneumonias.
So feeding isn't just, handing your kid a sandwich.
Yeah.
It's a carefully monitored medical procedure.
Exactly. It often requires tube feeding, highly specialized diets, and constant postural support just to get calories in safely.
That is intense. And alongside the physical manifestations, the lack of the PURA protein deeply impacts cognitive development too, right?
Yes, we see moderate to severe learning disabilities, and this is where it gets highly nuanced and honestly where parents often have to fight the absolute hardest to be understood. The communication barrier is massive.
Right.
Many individuals with PRA are entirely nonverbal. They just do not use spoken language.
But the source material is really adamant about a crucial distinction here. The parents report over and over again that while their children might be nonverbal, their receptive language skills, like their ability to understand what is being said to them, are often incredibly strong.
Yes. And it is a classic trap of the medical model to equate a lack of speech with a lack of understanding.
Oh, that's a great point.
These children are taking in their environment perfectly well. They just lack the neuromotor pathways to verbalize a response. So they have to rely on alternative and augmentative communication, or AAC.
We see a lot of references to a PODD book in the sources. Can you explain the actual mechanics of that? Because if a DWP assessor uses a PODD book, I feel like they might just picture a kid flipping through a picture book.
And they often do, which is why applications fail. A POBD book, which stands for Pragmatic Organization Dynamic Display, is a highly complex multi-page communication system. It's filled with symbols and words organized very systematically.
Okay.
But remember the hypertonia we talked about?
Right, the low muscle tone.
A child with PRA might not have the fine motor skills to physically point their finger to a 1-inch square on a specific page. So the parent has to perform what I call partner-assisted scanning.
Partner-assisted scanning. How does that actually work in practice? Like, paint a picture of that for me.
Okay, so the parent sits with the child and physically points to each column or symbol one by one, watching the child's face the entire time for a micro-expression.
A micro-expression, like a blink.
Like a widening of the eyes, a tiny vocalization, a specific movement that indicates, yes, that one. And then the parent turns to the indicated page and starts scanning the next set of options.
Oh.
It is a slow, intensely collaborative process. It means that for the child to just say, I want to watch cartoons, the parent must be entirely physically and cognitively engaged with them for several minutes.
See, that is a perfect example of what we mean by care.
Yeah.
It's not just basic supervision. It's acting as the child's literal voice box.
Exactly. And the medical complexity continues. We also see frequent reports of epilepsy and seizures, uncoordinated eye movements, and skeletal issues like scoliosis.
Which, again, is tied to that lack of core muscle tone failing to hold the spine straight, right?
Precisely. And, we really must touch on infancy as well because the early signs of PURA are incredibly distressing and very specific to this syndrome. What does it look like for a newborn?
Infants often exhibit excessive sleepiness, like to the point of severe lethargy, and they have severe temperature instability. Their bodies simply cannot regulate heat because the autonomic nervous system is misfiring.
Exactly. The autonomic nervous system controls the things we don't even think about: heart rate, digestion, temperature, and breathing. So we see neonatal breathing pauses, known as apnea.
That's terrifying for a new parent.
It is. Some babies breathe so shallowly they require supplementary oxygen, or even a tracheostomy, which is a surgically created hole in the windpipe just to maintain a basic airway.
And there's one symptom that the sources mentioned that is almost bizarrely specific to PURA.
Hiccups.
Yes, the hiccups. Mothers report feeling these violent, constant hiccuping movements while the baby is still in the womb, and it just continues relentlessly after birth.
It is a fascinating quirk of the syndrome. It rarely makes it into the high-level genetic literature, but in the patient community, it is a universal touchstone. Every parent knows about the hiccups.
That's incredible. So when you aggregate all of this, the apnea, the hypotonia, the seizures, the dysphagia, the communication barriers, you are looking at a child who requires multidisciplinary medical intervention from the second they are born.
You really are.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because you aren't just raising a kid. You are acting as a full-time medical project manager.
Right.
You're a respiratory therapist monitoring oxygen levels. You're a physiotherapist doing daily stretches to prevent muscle contractures. You are an occupational therapist facilitating every single interaction they have with the world through a communication device.
Which brings us to the psychological crux of the benefit system. How does a parent translate this profound, loving, all-consuming care into a government application?
Right. Because a DWP form does not ask, how deeply do you love your child? Or how resilient is your family?
No, it certainly does not.
It asks sterile, clinical questions about toilet needs and walking distances.
Yeah.
And the instinct of every parent, and I mean every parent, is to celebrate their child's progress.
Of course it is.
You want to shout from the rooftops about the day they used their PODD book to ask for an apple, or the day they held their head up for 20 seconds. You want to show the world their absolute best self.
But if you fill out a UK benefit form highlighting their best self, you will be denied support. Full stop. The welfare system is not designed to reward progress. It is designed to mitigate deficits. It is fundamentally a deficit-based model.
So what does that mean for the parent filling out the form?
It means when you sit down to fill out the Disability Living Allowance application, the DLA form, you must document what parents often refer to as the worst days.
I can imagine that takes a massive psychological toll to sit at your kitchen table for 4 hours and write down in agonizing detail every single thing your child cannot do.
It is traumatizing. It really is. But it is legally necessary. You have to force yourself to write down the darkest moments.
Give me an example of how a parent should write it versus how they might naturally want to write it.
Well, when the form asks about nighttime care, you cannot just write, Sarah struggles to sleep sometimes. You must detail the harsh reality. Sarah suffers from central sleep apnea. Her brain forgets to tell her lungs to breathe. Therefore, I must remain awake, monitoring her oxygen saturation machine, ready to intervene physically to stimulate breathing. If I do not provide this care, my child is at risk of death.
Wow. It feels so aggressive to write that.
It feels aggressive because you are fighting a bureaucracy that is actively looking for reasons to say no. You have to be aggressive.
Okay, what about the communication section?
Same thing. When it asks about communication, you don't say, Aiden is learning to use a PODD book. You state, Aiden is nonverbal. Without a trained adult physically facilitating a partner-assisted scan of his communication device, he is entirely isolated, unable to express pain, hunger, or distress.
You are legally proving that the care you provide vastly exceeds the care required for a neurotypical child of the exact same age.
Precisely. That is the benchmark.
Okay, so this detailed documentation of the worst days is the foundation of the entire financial support structure. It's what unlocks the very first gate. Let's move into how this actually translates into funding. We are looking at the Disability Living Allowance, DLA. The source material refers to this as the golden key.
It is the cornerstone. For a child under 16 in the UK, DLA is the primary disability benefit. And let's look at the philosophy behind it because that explains how it functions.
Okay, what's the philosophy?
DLA is not an income replacement benefit. It is an extra costs benefit. The government acknowledges that being disabled or raising a disabled child is inherently expensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. You need more heating because of the temperature instability. You need specialized transport. You need sensory equipment.
Exactly. So because it's meant to cover extra costs, it doesn't matter what the parents earn.
Wait, really? It's not means tested at all.
It is entirely non-means tested. You could be earning minimum wage or you could be a millionaire CEO. Your child's biological reality remains the same, so the entitlement remains the same, and it's also tax-free. It is based purely on the care and mobility needs of the child.
Okay, so the DLA is split into two components, right? Care and mobility. Let's focus on the care component because that is the linchpin for everything else we're going to talk about today.
Right.
The DWP offers the care component at 3 different rates: lowest, middle, and highest. Can you break those down?
Sure. The lowest rate is given if a child needs help for a significant portion of the day. The middle rate is for a child who needs frequent help or constant supervision during the day, or supervision at night.
Or at night, okay.
And the highest rate is for a child who needs help or supervision throughout both the day and the night.
Okay, here's the most vital warning for any parent listening right now. If your goal is to eventually claim carer's allowance to support yourself, your child must be awarded DLA at either the middle or the highest care rate.
Yes. This is crucial.
If the DWP awards you the lower care rate, the door to carer's allowance is slammed completely shut.
Let's attach the new April 2026 numbers to this so people know what to look for on their letters.
Great idea.
The middle care rate is £73.90 per week. The highest care rate is £110.40 per week. If your award letter says you are receiving either of those figures for care, you have secured the gateway.
But what if a parent fills out that massive form? You know, they document the apnea in the PODD book, and the DWP comes back and awards the lower care rate. And what if they also get the high mobility rate? Does the mobility money help them get carer's allowance?
No, not at all. The mobility component, whether it's high or low, is legally irrelevant to carer's allowance eligibility. If you get the lower care rate, you are blocked. And this is a trap families frequently fall into.
How so?
They see the letter, it says DLA awarded. They see money entering their bank account, and they assume they're safe. They don't check this specific rate.
Ah, I see. So if a parent gets that lower rate letter, what is the exact mechanism to fight back? Because you mentioned they need to challenge it, but how do they actually do that?
They must request what the DWP calls a mandatory reconsideration.
Okay, can we get an ELI 5 on that? Like, explain it like I'm 5.
Yeah.
Because mandatory reconsideration sounds like a very intimidating legal threat.
It does sound scary, but it essentially means you are forcing the DWP to have a completely different human being look at your original application from scratch.
Oh, yeah.
You were saying to them, the first person who read this made a fundamental error in judgment. You have 1 month from the date on your decision letter to ask for this.
1 month. That's a tight window.
Very tight. You can do it over the phone, but always, always follow up in writing. And you should provide more evidence. Maybe get a new letter from the neurologist explicitly explaining that the nighttime seizures require constant waking supervision.
Right, tying it back to the day and night requirement.
Exactly. And given the profound clinical profile of PURA syndrome, the complete lack of independent mobility, the severe dysphagia, the apnea, a middle or highest rate, is almost undeniably appropriate. The lower rate is usually a sign that the assessor just didn't understand the rarity or severity of the condition.
Okay, so let's assume the mandatory reconsideration was successful if the parent just got it right the first time. They have secured the middle or highest care rate for DLA. The gateway is open.
Yes.
Now, they face the first major hurdle for the parent's own support, carer's allowance. And the very first rule of carer's allowance is the 35-hour rule.
The law states that to claim carer's allowance, you must provide at least 35 hours of unpaid care per week to the disabled person.
35 hours. I mean, that is essentially a standard full-time corporate job.
Yeah.
I can easily see parents second-guessing themselves here.
They do it all the time.
Let's imagine a scenario to kind of test this out. Let's say we have a mother. Let's call her Emma. Emma's 8-year-old son with PURA is actually at a specialized educational placement from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 5 days a week.
Okay.
That's 30 hours he's completely out of the house.
Mm.
Emma might look at that 35-hour requirement and think, well, the school is doing the heavy lifting during the week.
Well,
I only physically bathe and feed him in the mornings and evenings. I probably don't hit 35 hours. I just shouldn't apply.
that self-censorship is one of the biggest reasons millions of pounds of carer's allowance go completely unclaimed every single year.
Really?
Yes, because Emma is operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of what the UK law actually considers care. Care is not just the physical heavy lifting. It is not just pushing a wheelchair or operating a feeding tube.
So what else is legally defined as care?
The legal definition explicitly includes keeping an eye on the person to prevent them from coming to harm.
Wait, just being vigilant counts as active care, like just watching them.
Yes. Think about the neurology of PURA that we just discussed. If your child has profound learning disabilities, they lack an innate sense of danger. They might have a highly unsteady gait due to the hypotonia. They might suffer from sudden, unpredictable absence seizures. So if Emma is sitting in the living room answering emails and her son is on the floor playing, she is not just relaxing.
No, she's on high alert.
Exactly. She is keeping an eye. She is listening for the sound of a fall or a change in his breathing or the sudden silence that might indicate a seizure. That constant low-level hum of vigilance is legally recognized as care. That time counts.
Okay, that drastically changes the map for the evenings and weekends. But what about when the child isn't even in the house? What about the 30 hours Emma's son is actually at school?
This is the second huge misunderstanding. Care includes practical tasks and administration done on behalf of the child, even when they are not physically present.
Oh, interesting. Give me some concrete examples of, like, admin as care.
Let's look at Emma's day. Her son goes to school. Emma spends 2 hours on the phone battling the local council transport department because the specialized taxi didn't show up.
A very common occurrence.
Right. Then she spends an hour thoroughly cleaning and sterilizing his feeding tube equipment. Then she spends an hour preparing specialized, pureed meals that meet his dysphagia requirements so they're ready when he gets home. Then she spends an hour sorting his complex anti-epileptic medication into a weekly dispenser.
Wow, that's 5 hours of care right there. And the child wasn't even in the room.
Exactly. And we haven't even discussed medical appointments.
That's the appointment.
Children with PURA have a relentless, exhausting schedule of clinical visits. Taking the child to the multidisciplinary clinic, the travel time, navigating the hospital parking, sitting in the waiting room, speaking with the geneticist, the orthopedic surgeon, the speech therapist, all of that entirely counts towards the 35 hours.
So the practical advice here for parents is to run an audit. Don't just guess.
Yes, never just guess.
Take a notebook, keep a care diary for one standard week, and track every single 15-minute increment you spend managing the fallout of this genetic mutation. The physical care, the vigilance, the medical admin, the travel. Because if you have a child with PURA syndrome, you will likely hit 35 hours by, like, Wednesday morning.
Without a doubt, you will blow past it. And there is a vital timeline note here regarding the DLA that ties into this.
Okay, what is it?
DLA is for children under 16. The exact day your child turns 16, the DLA system drops them. They must transition into the adult system, which is called Personal Independence Payment, or PIP.
And how does that affect the parent's carer's allowance?
To maintain your carer's allowance, your 16-year-old child must successfully be awarded the daily living component of PIP at either the standard or enhanced rate. It is absolutely crucial to manage this bureaucratic transition seamlessly. You must apply for PIP well ahead of time, ensuring there is no gap between the final DLA payment and the first PIP payment. Because if there is a gap, your carer's allowance will abruptly stop and you will have to reapply from scratch.
That sounds like a nightmare. Okay, so keep an eye on that 16th birthday.
Yes.
Right, so the 35 hours are documented, the gateway is secure. We are now looking directly at the mechanics of carer's allowance itself, and this is where the rules become incredibly strict, don't they? It's like the system stops caring about the child's biology and starts caring entirely about the parent's finances.
That is exactly what happens. Let's establish the baseline figures for the new tax year. As of April 6, 2026, the new rate for carer's allowance is £86.45 per week.
Okay, so that totals roughly £4,495 a year. And it's usually paid via bank transfer, either weekly in advance or every 4 weeks in arrears, right?
Correct. And the basic criteria for the parent are straightforward. You must be 16 or over. You must satisfy UK residence and presence conditions, meaning you normally live in England, Scotland, or Wales, and are not subject to immigration controls. And you cannot be in full-time education.
Wait, can we define full-time education quickly? Because universities, And the DWP often use the same words to mean completely different things.
They absolutely do. The DWP defines full-time education as a course that requires 21 hours or more of supervised study per week.
Okay.
If your university calls your course full-time, the DWP will generally just take their word for it. Now, if you are doing a part-time open university degree or a course with only, say, 10 hours of lectures, you are fine. But if it's over 21 hours, you are disqualified from carer's allowance, even if you are still doing the 35 hours of care at night.
Okay, that's important to know for younger carers or parents trying to retrain. But the real beast of carer's allowance, the thing that absolutely terrifies working parents, is the earnings limit.
Yes, the cliff edge.
For the 2026-2027 tax year, the government has set the limit at £204 per week after tax and deductions.
Yes, exactly 204 pounds.
I want to talk about how this actually functions because, honestly, it defies logic. Let's imagine a scenario to pressure test this limit. Let's imagine a father, David. And David works a part-time job on the weekends, mostly just to get out of the house for his own mental health. He earns £190 a week, so he's under the limit. And he gets his full 86-pound carer's allowance.
Right.
Now, let's say it's Christmas, and his boss asks him to stay an extra hour to clean up the shop. He earns an extra 15 pounds. So his weekly earnings hit 205 pounds.
Yeah.
How does the DWP handle that? Is it like a tax bracket where they just deduct like 20% of the extra money he earned? Does he just lose a few pounds of his benefit?
No. And this is the most crucial, brutal mechanism of the entire UK welfare system. It is not a sliding scale. It is not a taper.
What is it then?
Think of the 204-pound limit not as a boundary, but as a high-pressure valve. If David earns 204 pounds exactly, the valve holds. He keeps 100% of his carer's allowance.
Okay.
If he earns 204 pounds and 1 penny, if he earns a single penny over the limit, the entire valve blows. He loses 100% of his carer's allowance for that week. The whole 86 pounds just vanishes.
Over a single penny. I mean, that is mathematically maddening.
Right.
By working that extra hour to earn 15 pounds, David literally cost his family 71 pounds. He worked more to bring home less money.
It is widely criticized as a massive disincentive for carers to engage with the workforce or increase their hours or take a promotion. It forces parents into incredibly stressful micromanagement of their payslips.
Like imagine.
However, because the rule is so absolute, understanding the exact algorithm that DWP uses to calculate that 204 pounds is your strongest defense. Because the limit is 204 pounds after allowable deductions.
Ah, okay. This is where we get strategic. How does David legally lower his calculated earnings to stay under that 204-pound pressure valve?
First, the DWP looks at gross pay, and then they allow you to deduct income tax and national insurance contributions.
Okay, so we are effectively talking about net take-home pay mostly.
For the most part, yes. But here is the most powerful, underutilized tool in the entire system. Pensions.
Pensions.
Yes. The DWP allows you to deduct 50% of any contributions you make towards an occupational or personal pension.
Wait, I want to make sure I have the math on this exactly right, because this sounds huge. Let's go back to David.
Okay.
Let's say his take-home pay after tax is 244 pounds a week. He is 40 pounds over the limit. The valve is going to blow. He's going to lose his carer's allowance. But what if he takes 80 pounds out of his own pocket and puts it into a private pension fund?
If he puts 80 pounds into a pension, the DWP allows him to deduct half of that amount, which is 40 counts, from his earnings calculation. So his 244 pounds of income drops by 40. His DWP calculated earnings are now exactly 204 pounds.
He just saved his carer's allowance.
He saved his 86-pound carer's allowance, and he secured 80 pounds into his own retirement fund. It is a highly effective, entirely legal strategy to survive the cliff edge.
That is brilliant. I mean, it requires cash flow to float the pension contribution up front, but mathematically, it's a massive win. What else can a working parent deduct?
Alternative care costs. This is specifically designed for working carers. If you have to pay someone to look after your disabled child or even another neurotypical child you have while you are physically at work, you can deduct those care costs from your earnings.
Up to what amount? Like, is there a limit?
Yes, the maximum deduction is up to half of your net earnings. So if you net 300 pounds, you can deduct up to 150 pounds in care costs.
Are there rules on who you can pay? Could David just pay his own mother 50 pounds to watch the kids and write it off?
No, the DWP anticipated that loophole. The person providing the care cannot be a close relative. You cannot pay your spouse, a parent, a grandparent, a sister, or a brother. But if you are paying a professional childminder, a private nurse, an after-school club, or even a neighbor, those costs can be legally used to drag your calculated earnings back down below the 204-pound threshold.
That's incredibly helpful. What about expenses related to the job itself, like uniforms or travel?
You can deduct work expenses, but the legal definition is very tight. The expense must be wholly, exclusively, and necessarily incurred in carrying out your duties.
So, like, buying a bespoke suit for an office job doesn't count because you could technically wear it to a wedding.
Exactly. The DWP will say that's not exclusive to the job. But if you are required to buy specialized safety boots or specific tools, or if you have to pay for travel between different work sites during the day, those are deductible.
But not the commute, right?
Right. Your standard daily commute from your front door to your main office does not count.
So the big takeaway here is that keeping meticulous records, every pension statement, every childminder receipt, every work expense isn't just a good habit. It is the literal difference between getting 4,500 pounds a year from the government and getting absolutely zero.
Precisely. Now, regarding the logistics of applying, do it online at gov.uk. It is the fastest, most secure route.
What do they need to have ready?
You need your child's DLA award letter confirming the care component rate, your national insurance number, your bank details, and your latest payslips.
But wait, earlier we talked about mandatory reconsiderations for the DLA if you get the wrong rate. Those can take months.
Yes, they can.
What if it took the DWP 6 months to finally award the middle care rate? Has the parent just lost 6 months of carer's allowance while they were fighting for the DLA?
No. The system actually has a built-in protection for this. Carer's allowance can be backdated for up to 3 months prior to the date you actually submit the claim, provided you met all the eligibility criteria during that time.
Oh, that's good.
Furthermore, if you claim carer's allowance within 3 months of receiving the final DLA award letter, the carer's allowance can be backdated all the way to the start date of the DLA award.
Oh, that's a huge relief.
Yeah.
So you don't lose the money while you're fighting the bureaucracy.
Right.
One final technicality on carer's allowance before we move on. What if both parents are doing the 35 hours? Because with a condition like PURA, it's easily a two-person job. Can they both claim the 86 pounds?
No. The DWP only pays one carer's allowance per disabled person. Even if both parents are doing 70 hours a week each, you have to decide between yourselves who will make the claim.
How do you choose?
Usually, it makes financial sense for the parent earning less or the parent who has given up work entirely to be the claimant.
Okay, so you have navigated the 35 hours, you survived the 204-pound pressure valve, you are officially receiving carer's allowance. But the moment that application is approved, it triggers this massive ripple effect across the rest of the government, doesn't it?
It really does. Carer's allowance does not exist in a vacuum. It interacts with everything else. And this is where parents often get completely lost because some of these interactions are incredibly helpful and some are deeply frustrating.
Let's start with the frustrating part. The philosophy of the state regarding what they call overlapping benefits. Why do they overlap?
The government classifies certain benefits by their purpose. Carer's allowance is classified as an income replacement benefit. The philosophy is that you are receiving this money because your caring duties prevent you from earning a full-time wage.
Okay.
The state pension is also an income replacement benefit designed for when you are too old to work. Contributory employment and support allowance, or ESA, is for when you are too sick to work. Maternity allowance is for when you've just had a baby.
So they all serve the exact same philosophical function, replacing a lost salary.
Exactly. And the DWP has a strict rule. You cannot be paid twice for the same fundamental purpose. You cannot receive two income replacement benefits simultaneously. If you are entitled to two, the government will only pay you the one that is worth more money.
Okay, so let's put this into a real-world context. Say we have a grandmother who is raising her grandchild who has PURA syndrome.
Okay.
And she is doing 80 hours of care a week, so way over the 35 hours. But she's also receiving her state pension, which pays, let's say, 150 pounds a week.
She will not receive the physical 86-pound carer's allowance payment because her 150-pound pension is more than 86 pounds.
That feels like a punishment for getting old. I mean, she is still doing the 35 hours of care, so she shouldn't even bother filling out the carer's allowance form, right?
Yeah.
Like, why do the paperwork?
No. That is the most dangerous misconception in the entire system. She absolutely must apply for carer's allowance.
But you just said she won't get the money.
She won't get the cash payment for carer's allowance, But if she applies and the DWP agrees, she meets all the criteria like doing the 35 hours and having the DLA gateway, she is granted a legal status called an underlying entitlement.
An underlying entitlement. I need another ELI 5 on this. What is this? Like a ghost benefit?
It is exactly like a ghost benefit. It is a hidden VIP status on your government file. You don't see the 86 pounds entering your bank account, but the computer system recognizes you as an official, certified, full-time carer.
And what does that ghost status do?
That ghost status is the key that unlocks the hidden wins. It unlocks the premiums and elements that are scattered throughout the rest of the welfare system.
So the underlying entitlement proves to the rest of the government algorithms that you deserve extra help.
Yes. Even if the overlapping benefit rule denies you the cash, having that underlying entitlement almost always unlocks additional top-ups in other means-tested benefits that make you financially better off overall.
Okay, let's break down these hidden wins, because this is how families actually survive. Let's start with the older legacy benefits system. What happens there?
If you are still on legacy benefits like income support, income-based job seekers allowance, income-related ESA, or housing benefit having carer's allowance or the underlying entitlement to it, automatically adds a carer premium to your financial calculation.
And how much is that?
For the 2026-27 tax year, the carer premium is worth an extra £48.15 per week.
Oh. So the grandmother on her state pension gets her underlying entitlement, and suddenly she is eligible for a carer addition in her pension credit, also worth £48 a week. She didn't get the 86 pounds, but she got a 48-pound boost she would have otherwise entirely missed.
Exactly. It alters the algorithm in her favor. She must do the paperwork.
But the vast majority of new claims, and most working-age parents, are dealing with universal credit now. And universal credit has a terrifying reputation.
It does.
I mean, I have heard stories of parents being told by well-meaning friends on Facebook, do not apply for carer's allowance. It just gets deducted straight out of your universal credit. It's a scam. If a parent hears that, what is the actual truth?
The truth is that the Facebook advice is mathematically flawed because it only looks at half the equation.
Okay, walk me through it.
It is true that universal credit treats carer's allowance as unearned income. Therefore, it deducts it pound for pound. If the DWP pays you 86 pounds a week in carer's allowance, the universal credit computer will deduct exactly 86 pounds a week from your universal credit award.
So the Facebook friend is right. It's a zero-sum game. The government gives with the left hand and takes with the right. Again, why do the paperwork?
Because of what the right hand does next. The moment universal credit sees that you are receiving carer's allowance, it adds a carer element to your maximum entitlement pot. It expands the size of the pie before it starts making deductions.
Okay, let's use the new 2026 numbers to prove this math.
For 2026-27, the universal credit carer element is worth an extra £209.34 a month.
Wow.
So yes, they take away the carer's allowance cash from your UC payment, but they increase your overall baseline entitlement by over £200 a month. When you run the final math, a family receiving carer's allowance and universal credit is almost always financially better off than a family receiving universal credit alone.
So the golden rule is, always do the paperwork. Trigger the element.
Always.
But wait, there is a massive non-financial win buried in universal credit for carers too, isn't there? Something about job searching.
A life-changing one. Universal credit is notorious for its strict conditionality. If you claim it, the job center usually forces you to spend 35 hours a week searching for work, attending mandatory interviews, and constantly proving you were trying to get a job.
And if you fail?
They sanction you and cut your money.
Which is an impossible demand for a parent managing the apnea, the PODD book of a child with PURA. You can't be at a job interview if your kid is aspirating.
Exactly. But if you secure carer's allowance, or if you simply report to universal credit that you are caring for a disabled child for 35 hours a week, the system legally exempts you from all work search requirements.
Entirely.
Entirely. The job center cannot force you to attend interviews. They cannot force you to look for work. The state legally recognizes that you are already fully employed as a carer.
That is an unbelievable relief for parental mental health. To just not have a job center coach threatening your grocery money while you were sitting at the hospital.
It's huge.
And universal credit has another hidden boost just for the child, right? Tied to the DLA.
Yes, the Disabled Child Edition. Completely separate from what the parent gets for caring. Simply having a child who receives DLA boosts your universal credit calculation.
By how much?
If the child gets the middle DLA rate, your UC goes up by £158.76 a month. If they get the highest DLA care rate, Or if they are registered blind, your UC gets a massive boost of £495 and 87 pence a month.
This is why we call DLA the golden key. It unlocks the carer's allowance. Carer's allowance unlocks the carer element and the work search exemption. The DLA itself unlocks the disabled child edition. It is a cascading waterfall of support, but it literally all hinges on documenting those worst days accurately back at the start.
It all connects back to the reality of the condition.
What about outside of direct cash? What about housing and transport? Because a kid with PURA has profound physical needs that affect where you live and how you move.
The protections extend there as well. Let's look at housing. The UK has a policy called the benefit cap.
Right, which limits the total amount of money an out-of-work family can receive from the state.
Yes, it's designed to force people into work. However, if you have a dependent child living with you who receives DLA, your entire household is completely exempt from the benefit cap. There is no ceiling on the support you can receive.
That's a big deal. What about the bedroom tax? That's where the government reduces your housing support if they think you have a spare bedroom, right?
Correct. Normally, the government expects 2 children under 10 or 2 children of the same sex under 16 to share a bedroom. But if your child has PURA syndrome, sharing a room might be medically impossible.
Yeah. I mean, if they have nighttime seizures or loud apnea alarms or require large, specialized orthopedic beds and hoists, putting a sibling in that room is fundamentally unsafe.
Exactly. And if you are receiving the middle or highest rate DLA care component, you can argue for an extra bedroom allowance in your housing benefit or universal credit calculation. You are protected from the bedroom tax.
And transport. Because moving a child with hypotonia who might be in a heavy wheelchair and who has sudden medical crises requires a very specific type of vehicle.
This is where the mobility component of DLA finally comes into play. We said it didn't help with carer's allowance, but it helps here. If your child is awarded the higher rate mobility component, which they can get from age 3, you gain access to the Motability scheme.
How does that work?
You can legally trade that mobility payment to lease a brand new adapted vehicle, a specialized wheelchair, or a mobility scooter. It covers insurance, breakdown cover, and servicing.
And what about the blue badge for parking?
If you have the higher rate mobility, you automatically qualify for a blue badge. That allows you to park in disabled spaces, on double yellow lines in certain circumstances, and often park for free at hospitals. It is a logistical lifesaver.
The interconnectivity of these systems is just breathtaking.
Yeah.
It really is a fortress of support if you build it right. But I want to throw one more wrench in the works before we move on to education.
Okay, throw it.
What if a parent falls through the cracks? What if a mother cares for her PURA child for 25 hours a week, but she also works a highly paid consulting job where she earns like 500 pounds a week?
Okay.
She completely shatters the 204-pound carer's allowance pressure valve. She can't get the money. She doesn't qualify for universal credit because her husband also works. Did she just get zero recognition from the state?
She doesn't get cash, but the system has a vital safety net for her future called carer's credit. And this is a vastly underclaimed benefit.
Really? Who qualifies?
If you care for someone for just 20 hours or more a week, and they receive the qualifying DLA, but you earn too much to claim carer's allowance, you must actively apply for carer's credit.
What does a credit actually do?
It protects her retirement. The UK state pension is based on how many years of national insurance, or NI, contributions you have paid over your working life.
Right.
If you have to drop down to part-time hours to care for your child and your earnings drop below the threshold where you actually pay NI, you will have a gap in your record. When you retire, your pension will be smaller.
So carer's credit fixes that.
Yes. Carer's credit acts as a phantom payment. The government steps in and pays your Class 3 national insurance contributions for you, filling the gap in your record.
So it's invisible money now to ensure you aren't living in poverty when you are 70.
Exactly. It acknowledges that unpaid care work has long-term economic consequences for the caregiver, and it attempts to mitigate that specific damage.
Wow. Okay, we have spent a long time dissecting how to fund and protect the home environment. We have optimized the DLA, we navigated the carer's allowance, and we triggered the universal credit premiums. But raising a child with PURA syndrome doesn't just happen in the living room.
No, it happens in the educational system as well.
Right. The therapies, the specialized equipment, the one-on-one support staff that cost tens of thousands of pounds a year, the DLA doesn't even begin to cover that. To secure that funding, we have to master a completely different legal structure. We have to dissect the Education, Health, and Care Plan, the EHCP.
The EHCP is arguably the most important document in your child's life outside of their actual medical records. It is a legally binding contract.
Who issues it?
It is issued by the local authority, the council, not the school. It describes exactly what your child's special educational needs are, and it legally mandates the provision required to meet those needs from age 0 up to 25.
I hear parents talk about the EHCP constantly. For a child with PURA, whose needs span education, health, and social care, it is not optional. It is the absolute foundation of their survival in a school setting.
Yes.
But the friction comes during the annual review. An EHCP is supposed to be an ironclad contract, but parents often report that the annual review feels like, well, a casual chat over week tea in the headmaster's office.
Oh, the week tea chat,
The
yes.
school smiles, says, oh, Aiden is a joy to have in class. He's doing fine. And the document doesn't change.
And that is exactly how a child gets left behind. A nonverbal 5-year-old with hypotonia requires fundamentally different support than a 14-year-old approaching puberty, growing heavier, and needing transition planning for adulthood.
Obviously.
The annual review is not a parent-teacher conference. It is a strict statutory process required by law to happen at least every 12 months, or every 3 to 6 months for children under 5. It is a formal legal evaluation designed to do one of 3 things: maintain the plan as is, amend the plan to reflect new needs, or cease the plan entirely.
To manage this review effectively and force the school and the council to take it seriously, parents need to understand the anatomy of the EHCP. It's a massive document, but which parts are the actual legal battlegrounds?
The EHCP is divided into 12 alphabetical sections, A through K, but the core engine of the document is the relationship between 3 specific sections, B, E, and F.
Okay, break those down.
Section B details the child's special educational needs. It must be brutally comprehensive. If a need is not listed in Section B, the council has no legal obligation to fund support for it.
So if the apnea isn't explicitly in Section B, the council won't pay for a night nurse or a one-to-one monitor on school trips.
Exactly. Section B feeds directly into Section E, which lists the outcomes. What are we actually trying to achieve for this child? The law demands that these outcomes must be SMART.
SMART. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound.
Correct. And this is where local authorities try to save money by using vague language.
Give me a scenario. What does a bad, vague outcome look like for a child with PURA?
A local authority drafter might write in Section E, Sarah will improve her communication skills and engage more with her peers.
I mean, that sounds nice on paper.
It sounds lovely, but legally, it is entirely worthless. How do you measure engage more? Is it 1 smile a week? Is it a full conversation? It holds no one accountable.
Right. So what should they push for instead?
A parent must fight to replace that with a SMART outcome. A SMART outcome looks like this. By the end of the academic year, Sarah will independently use her PODD book to request a minimum of 5 different preferred items during lunchtime across 3 consecutive weeks, as recorded by her 1.1 teaching assistant.
Wow. That is bulletproof. You can definitively prove whether that happened or not, and if it didn't happen, the school has failed the legal contract.
Precisely. And the outcome in Section E dictates the most important part of the entire document. Section F. Section F is the provision. This is the actual tangible support that the council must pay for and deliver to achieve the outcome.
And what is the enemy of a strong Section F?
2 words. Access to. Local authorities love to write that a child will have access to support. They will write, Aiden will have access to a speech and language therapist.
Why is that dangerous? It sounds like they're giving him a therapist.
Because access to could legally mean Aiden sits in an assembly hall with 400 other children while a therapist gives a lecture on pronunciation once a term. He technically had access.
Oh, that's incredibly sneaky.
Provision in Section F must be quantified and specified. It must state exactly what the support is, how often it happens, how long each session is, and who must deliver it.
So a parent needs to force the council to rewrite it as, Aiden will receive 1 45-minute individual session of speech and language therapy per week, delivered by a fully qualified speech and language therapist with AAC experience to program and train him on his electronic communication device.
If it is written like that, the local authority is legally bound to provide it. Even if they have a staffing shortage, even if they have no money in the budget, they must go to the private sector and pay for a therapist to fulfill that contract.
And because PURA syndrome is so physically complex, the educational sections aren't enough, are they?
Yeah.
We have to talk about the health and social care sections of the EHCP.
Absolutely. Sections C and D identify the health and social care needs related to the disability, the severe dysphagia, the epilepsy, the risk of aspiration. Section G lists the specific health care provision required. Section H1 and H2 deal with social care provision.
Can you give an example of what goes in there?
If a child with PURA requires a specialized standing frame to manage their hypotonia and prevent their hips from dislocating, or if they need constant access to suction equipment for swallowing issues, it must be legally codified in these sections.
So how does a parent practically run the annual review meeting to ensure all these sections actually get updated? Because you can't just walk in blind and hope for the best.
It requires tactical, aggressive preparation. You are essentially building a legal case. First, you gather the child's views for Section A, the All About Me section. Even if your child is completely nonverbal, you must find a person-centered way to represent them. Use photographs of them enjoying activities or a list of what makes them smile versus what causes them distress.
And what about the evidence for sections B and F? You can't just rely on the school's internal observations, can you?
Never. The school's observations are often constrained by their own budgets. You must request updated professional clinical reports. You need a new report from the physiotherapist detailing the progression of the scoliosis. You need a report from the occupational therapist. You need the speech therapist's data.
When do you ask for those?
You must request these reports from the school's Special Educational Needs Coordinator, the SEND, at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting. If you do not have current clinical data, the review cannot accurately happen.
During the meeting, you don't just chat.
Right.
You go through the EHCP line by line, section by section. You highlight what outcomes were achieved. You strike through the vague language, and you demand amendments based entirely on the clinical evidence in those reports.
Yes.
And once that meeting ends, the clock starts ticking on the bureaucracy.
The statutory timelines are where the system often attempts to grind parents down through delay. You must know the law to hold them accountable. The school has exactly 2 weeks from the date of the meeting to type up their report of what was discussed and send their recommendations for amendments to the local authority.
And then the ball is in the council's court.
The local authority has exactly 4 weeks from the day of the meeting to issue a formal decision. Will they maintain the plan as is, amend it, or cease it?
Okay.
If they agree to amend it based on your evidence, they issue a draft of the new plan. You have 15 days to review that draft and demand changes. The final, legally binding amended plan must be issued within 8 weeks of their decision to amend. That is a maximum total of 12 weeks from the date of the review meeting.
But let's look at reality for a second. Local authorities are chronically underfunded. What if they just ignore the timelines? Or worse, what if they look at your request for a one-to-one dedicated aid for your child with PURA and they say, no, we refuse to amend the plan. We think access to a shared teaching assistant is fine.
Then you escalate. You take them to court. If you disagree with the local authority's refusal to amend, or if you disagree with the final contents of the plan, say they refuse to put the speech therapy in Section F, you have exactly 2 months from the date of their decision letter to lodge an appeal to the SEND Tribunal.
Let's do a final ELI 5 on the SEND Tribunal. The word tribunal sounds like a criminal trial. It sounds terrifying for a parent who is already exhausted.
It is intimidating, but it is your ultimate weapon. The SEND Tribunal is an independent national legal body. It is completely separate from your local authority. It is a panel made up of a judge and specialist educational experts.
Okay, so it's not just local council workers.
Right. Before you go, you usually have to consider mediation, which is a meeting to try and resolve it without court. But if mediation fails, you submit your appeal.
Do parents need to hire expensive lawyers for this? Because that feels like another massive barrier.
You can, but you absolutely do not have to. Organizations like SENDIAs provide free, independent advice and can help you build your case. During the tribunal hearing, which is often held virtually now, the local authority will try to argue why they shouldn't have to pay for the provision.
And what do?
You will present your clinical reports. You will say, the occupational therapist's report explicitly states, my child needs this standing frame to prevent surgery.
And how do tribunals usually rule? Like, do parents actually win these things?
Historically, the overwhelming majority of SEND Tribunal appeals are won by the parents, because the tribunal does not care about the local authority's budget constraints. The tribunal only cares about the law. If the clinical evidence shows that the provision is necessary to meet the child's educational needs, the tribunal will issue a legally binding order forcing the local authority to rewrite the EHCP and fund the support.
It is about fiercely, unapologetically defending that contract,
Yeah.
because that document dictates your child's quality of life for the next year.
It is a full-time, high-stakes advocacy job.
We have covered an immense landscape today. The journey of funding a life with PURA syndrome is clearly not for the faint of heart. We started by exploring the microscopic reality of the 5q31.3 mutation. We looked at how the failure of the PURA protein to regulate the nervous system leads to the hypotonia, the complex apnea, the dysphagia, and the reliance on AEC devices like the PODD book.
And we acknowledge the psychological trauma of documenting those realities the worst days on the DLA forms. But we saw how securing the middle or highest care rate of DLA acts as the primary gateway to the rest of the system.
We navigated the strict mechanics of carer's allowance. We learned that the 35-hour rule encompasses the constant vigilance and the administrative burden, not just physical lifting. We examined the April 2026 rate of £86.45, and we defeated the 204-pound earnings pressure valve by strategically utilizing legal deductions like 50% of pension contributions and alternative childcare costs.
We then explored the broader welfare ecosystem. We understood the philosophy of overlapping benefits and how claiming an underlying entitlement acts as a ghost status to unlock the universal credit carer element, adding over £200 a month to a family's income and shielding parents from punitive work search requirements.
And finally, we moved into the educational sphere. We dissected the EHCP, demanding smart outcomes in Section E and highly quantified provision in Section F, rejecting vague access to language. We laid out the strict 12-week statutory timeline for annual reviews, with the independent SEND Tribunal standing as our ultimate enforcement mechanism.
It is an administrative marathon that requires deep systemic knowledge.
It is. And to the parents and carers listening right now, we know your reality. We know the paperwork feels endless and the bureaucracy feels deeply antagonistic. It feels like you are constantly fighting a system that was theoretically built to protect you. But I want you to reframe this one last time. Every single 40-page form you fill out correctly, every pension deduction you meticulously calculate to survive the 204-pound limit, every smart outcome you ruthlessly negotiate at a school meeting that is not just paperwork.
No, it's not.
It is a direct, tangible investment in your child's quality of life. It is the bricks and mortar of your family's stability. You are building a fortress of support. And crucially, you are not alone in the wilderness. Connect with the PURA Syndrome Foundation. Connect with the global community of 800 families who deeply instinctively understand exactly what this journey requires.
If we step back and look at the macro picture, analyzing this entire benefit structure forces us to ask a deeply profound question about how society values care. The current UK welfare system forces families to quantify their profound love, their sleepless nights, and their exhausting dedication into highly rigid hourly increments and unforgiving 204-pound income thresholds.
Yeah.
It essentially treats caring for a profoundly medically complex child like a slightly modified, heavily penalized minimum wage job. It raises a provocative question. What would a societal support system actually look like if it were designed from the ground up to measure the intensity and the complexity of care, rather than just acting as a crude financial filter? What if the state trusted the reality of parents instead of constantly assessing them?
That is a thought to mull over long after this audio ends. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the intricacies of DLA, carer's allowance, and the EHCP. We know you are exhausted, but we also know you are the most incredible advocates on earth. Keep fighting for the precision and the support your child deserves. Because even when the diagnostic x-ray is broken and the bureaucratic landscape is murky, the love and the relentless care you provide is clearer and vastly more powerful than any government algorithm. Stay strong.